welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Nicole McGonigal. I'm an artist and a teacher. So what I'm going to be doing, I'll be making some art tutorials for you. We are starting off with fluid pours, and specifically we'll be making a jellyfish with the fluid pour methods. I'm going to walk you through this painting step by step, and this will be the painting that we will be creating together. So let's go ahead and get started with our jellyfish painting today. All right, we're going to go over the materials that we need. You're going to want a canvas, a surface to be painting on. You're going to want acrylic paint, a pouring medium, and cups or a container to be able to mix your paints in to get fluid paint. You're going to want a palette knife to place the paint down on the canvas and to help with mixing. We're going to want string or a thin chain to help create the jellyfish stingers. If you want to put some foil accents onto your painting, you're going to want foil, glue, and a paintbrush. If you would like to add an epoxy finish to your painting, you're going to want an epoxy, painter's tape, butane torch, and your PPE, your personal protection equipment. Okay, so first step, you are going to figure out what you would like your background color to be. So for mine, I chose white because I wanted my focus to be mainly on the jellyfish blues. So I took my white paint and I mixed it in with my pouring medium and created my fluid paint. Poured that all over my canvas, and I'm going to use my palette knife to spread that around evenly onto the canvas to create a very nice wet surface for my blue paints to go on top. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to have my paint colors that I want for my jellyfish body to be ready. So I'm going to mix that in again with my pouring medium to create my fluid paints. Then I'm going to start shaping the body of the jellyfish. For my painting, I decided to put in two jellyfish. You can have more than that. You could have less than that. It's up to you as the artist. So I'm using my palette knife and I'm just scooping up a little bit of each of my blue colors and I'm starting to form that body shape. I'm filling it in with the blue colors as I see fit. So I have a mixture of three blue colors happening here. I have a lighter blue, a medium blue, and a darker blue. I am doing all of this while my background color, that white paint, is still wet. For this step right here, I'm going to be going in with my chain or my string, and I will be making those jellyfish stingers. So this is the pulling method of the string or the chain, which you're going to see me doing in this video right here. So I can do this a couple of different ways. I can either dip the end of my chain or string into my actual paint and then kind of zigzag it in one spot. Then I'm going to pull it up towards the top of the jellyfish head. Or I could create a small pile of the paint color that I want onto my canvas. Then I'm going to zigzag my chain or string inside that pile, and then I will pull it up towards the top of the jellyfish head. So that's two ways that you could do this part here. It's up to you and how you would like to do it. You could try both ways and see which way you like better visually as the artist. After I have all of the jellyfish stingers in that I would like, I am going to go in with my palette knife to create just the jellyfish tentacles now. The jellyfish tentacles are going to be thinner and at various lengths. Some of them I like to make longer than the stingers and some a little bit shorter. I also like to use the foil later on to create some of those tentacles as well. But for right now, I'm going to use my blue colors, my palette knife, and I'm just going to wave them through from the bottom of the jellyfish head and down to an appropriate length that I find fit as the artist. You will see that I am grabbing some of that blue paint on the end of that palette knife, and then I'm bringing it up to the top and then down through the white paint, creating those swirls. So that's how that blue paint is getting in there for me to be able to move and manipulate it into those jellyfish tentacles. Now I'm going to let what I had just did sit, kind of settle, see if I want to add anything or fix anything with the previous techniques that I just talked about. Sometimes I want to go back in with my string, make that line a little bit darker, a little bit more bolder, or I'll use my palette knife to create some of the tentacles a little bit more in depth there. So after that's going to dry, that will take about a day or two to dry fully. It depends on how much wet paint you place down there. Once that does dry, I will be going in with a very fine paintbrush. I'm going to use the same exact blue colors that I was working with, and I'm going to paint in any finer details that I would like to add in. So some of the tentacles I'm making a little bit darker, a little bit more of a point to the end of them, or I might go into the body of the jellyfish and I might darken up some areas or add in some extra lines that I feel fit to go along with that beautiful fluid pour details that we see, those cell pockets that are forming. I might want to add in the look of some of them with some finer lines. So that's what I'm doing here with my fine detail brush. So, sometimes you might find that you don't want to add anything in like this, but it is an option in case there's something that's bothering you and you would like to go in and fix it. All right, after I let those fine details dry, I'm going to go in with some glue and some foil, and we're going to add a little bit of some sparkle here to this beautiful jellyfish painting. So what I'm doing is I am taking a fine brush again, and I'm using some glue, and I'm just creating a path with my paintbrush where I would like that glue to go. I do like to use a finer brush because I like thinner lines of my foil. You can always use a thicker or place a thicker line of glue down to be able to get a more chunkier look with your foil. I'm going to place that foil down on top of that glue. I'm going to let this dry completely. Then I will take an old paintbrush and I'm going to sweep off the foil that it will not be sticking down to clean that up. Now, foil can be tricky to work with. It loves to stick to your hands. It loves to stick to the surface. So it will take a lot of brushing and some patience to be able to clean up your canvas of the foil that you don't want on there anymore. So hang in there, have that paper towel or towel handy so you can wipe off your hands or your paintbrush that you're working with, or even to help kind of brush some of that off of your surface. I have noticed that if there is something that's really sticking, I'll take a little bit of a cloth that is damp and I'll use that to kind of wipe it away. Usually that will get that on there, get it away for me. So you kind of have to be patient with this foil, but it's definitely worth working with for the end result, in my opinion, that is. All right, now it is time for us to prep our surface for our epoxy. So what I'm doing right now, I'm taking painter's tape. I am painting the sides of my my canvas. You'll see me doing that here. Other artists will also tape the bottom, so any drops that could possibly go down to the bottom, they can just peel it off with the painter's tape using the heat gun or butane torch. What I like to do is I like to take my painter's tape and I like to make a little bit of an edge coming up past the top surface of my canvas, and that acts as a barrier for my epoxy to make sure that doesn't flow down the sides, which usually stops me from getting any drips on the back of my canvas. Sometimes it can still happen depending on the tape that I'm using. If it's not like sticking very well to my canvas, it could like sneak down, but I usually monitor that as my epoxy is settling and I fix that problem right away. But if you feel like you don't have the opportunity to monitor your epoxy very closely, then make sure you put that painter's tape on the bottom back side of your canvas as well. Now that my surface is all prepped with my painter's tape, I am going to also protect the surface that I am working on. So I am putting either some kind of plastic underneath. So right now I'm just using a trash bag to catch anything epoxy that is falling down on the surface, just so I don't ruin my table, even though it's pretty messy already from all of that paint that I put on here. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my epoxy. I'm going to follow the directions that are on that epoxy container. Your epoxy might be different than mine, so I'm not going to really go into depth of how my epoxy is with my mixing. There should be a time that you need to mix your epoxy correctly with, and also an amount. So usually it's 1-to-1 ratio, but again, your epoxy could be different. So before I do that though, I do take my little level and I make sure that my surface is nice and level because I don't want my epoxy to lean towards one side more than another and make an uneven surface for me. So I want to make sure that's nice, flat, even, so then I get a great coverage of my epoxy and not have any spots that don't get covered with that epoxy. I also want to make sure that I am putting on my PPE here, so I am putting on some rubber gloves to protect my hands. Epoxy does have some risk to it, so make sure you refer to the packaging of your epoxy to see what risk your epoxy could have and what equipment they suggest that you have ready to keep yourself safe from inhaling or getting it onto your skin. All right, so once I have my epoxy all ready to go, I'm going to start pouring it onto my surface, and I'm going to try to pour that evenly. I can use a plastic knife. They do have plastic spreaders to use for epoxy. I'm just going to spread that around evenly around my canvas. You could even use an old palette knife, but I would suggest kind of tossing that after you use it, just in case the epoxy you have on there doesn't cure correctly, then it'll just be a super sticky mess. So what I'm doing here is I'm also going to be looking for any parts of my surface as the epoxy is kind of settling there to see if there are any little divots or uneven spread of the epoxy, and I'll just kind of move epoxy around to fill in any of those holes or gaps. I usually find that these gaps can happen along the edge of my canvas. So what I'll do is I'll get down on eye level and I'll even use a flashlight, kind of shine it around, and that'll really show me where any of these holes are or emptiness, so then I can fill it in and get a nice even surface with my epoxy. Because we don't want a bumpy or uneven surface with it, because once it cures and dries and you're looking at it at different angles, you'll definitely be able to see those divots and pockets that are happening. So nice smooth surface with our epoxy. Monitor it as it's starting to dry so you can move that epoxy around as you need to. I will take my butane torch as I am monitoring as well, and I'm going to use that beautiful fire and heat to get away any of those air bubbles that are in my epoxy. That way I will get a very nice, clear, crisp look to my painting at the end, instead of having bubbles in there that can kind of make my painting then a little blurry looking. For this particular painting with my jellyfish, some of the bubbles I don't mind having in there, the tiny ones, just because it kind of adds to that underwater theme here. But if you're very picky, monitor your epoxy very closely as it is curing. The first, I would say 15 minutes, 15-20 minutes are kind of like that golden time where you can really get rid of all those bubbles that you really want. So you might go over it once with the torch, and then you need to go back a couple minutes later. I would just wait like a minute or two, and then you're going to get rid of more of those bubbles. And you kind of can keep doing that until you get the bubbles away that you would like. We are almost done here with our jellyfish painting. Once you finish getting all those bubbles out, let your epoxy sit in an area that dirt or debris can't land on the epoxy, and you're going to let that finish curing. So what I usually like to do, I like to wait until it's very close to being cured, and I'll start peeling off that tape right away, because at this point it's not going to fall off the edges because of how the point in the process that it's at. However, some artists prefer to keep it safe and they just wait until it is completely cured, and then they'll peel off that tape using their butane torch or heat gun to kind of warm it up to be able to peel that off. You can do it either way. If you would like to play it safe, just wait until it's completely cured, then peel it off. But for me, since I've worked with epoxy for quite some time now and I'm confident of my timing with the epoxy, I'll just peel it off about mid to maybe a quarter way into being cured all the way. So completely up to you what you would like to do with that one, but you'll have to get that tape off of there. Sometimes it can stick pretty well, so make sure you have that butane torch ready, and even you could use an X-Acto knife to help you get it off as well. So but that's it for our jellyfish painting here. You can wait to the end here, see some of those results. If you have any questions about your jellyfish painting, feel free to reach out to me here on YouTube and I will certainly help you out. You can check out my Instagram on there and also more of my YouTube videos that I'll be putting up hopefully soon. But regardless, I hope your painting turned out beautifully. I'm sure it did. But thank you so much for watching my channel, and I hope to see you back here. All right, have a nice, good day.